One of my favorite proverbs is, when is the best time to plant a tree? The best time was 20 years ago. But the second best time is today. So today you can plant that tree, and your 20-year future self will thank you for the decision you made to do something about your health.
Welcome to the Wealth Strategy Secrets of the Ultra Wealthy podcast, where we help entrepreneurs like you exponentially build wealth through passive income to live a life of freedom and prosperity. Are you tired of paying too much in taxes, gambling your future on the stock market, and want to learn about hidden strategies for making your money work for you? And now your host, Dave Wolcott, serial entrepreneur and author of the best-selling book, The Holistic Wealth Strategy.
How's it going, everyone? And welcome to today's show on Wealth Strategy Secrets. Today, we're joined by Regan Archibald. Regan is a renowned expert and founder of EastWest Health that focuses on peptides, functional medicine, and longevity. To date, they've run over 9,000 comprehensive blood labs and analyzed 94 crucial markers to pinpoint the root causes of health issues. Regan has also authored over 9 books, including The Peptide Blueprint and his upcoming Ageless Future. It's going to be a great conversation where we unpack what peptides are, how you can use them to really optimize your health, as well as how you can look at functional medicine and use a data-driven approach to analyze these markers on how your health is actually performing, how you can optimize it, and truly identify the root causes of some of your issues. Hope you enjoy the show. Regan, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Dave.
Yeah, no, really awesome to have you on the show, Regan. Excited about this conversation. And I think you're going to blow the listeners' minds with some of the tactics and strategies you have around peak performance, health optimization, longevity, and all those things that I think we're looking for. And what I always find fascinating and what I try to encourage people to think about. We talk a lot about investing and wealth and things like that, but I always remind people that, the best investment you can ever make is in yourself. So that's in your health, your relationships, your mindset, your education. And I think everyone's going to get a lot out of today's discussion. So excited to have you here and really unpack some of those secrets that you've uncovered, Regan. And I think that's probably a good place to start, right? Is, what led you to actually found EastWest Health and get into the track that you're on today?
Well, first of all, I appreciate your insights on health is the number one asset that you want to invest in. I invest a lot of money, 6 figures a year in my health. And it's the one area that I always have outsized returns. Some investments do better than others, as everyone on your channel knows, but the health is the one that's consistently something that I really appreciate. And then I help other entrepreneurs do the same. I help them realize that no matter how much wealth they have accumulated, how many great assets, how great their business may or may not be, it's secondary to their health. So when health improves, everything improves. And so, I look at wealth and health as being like derivative of the same word. There's actually a lot of research that shows that the healthier people are and the fitter people are. You can look at fitness levels, and you're super fit too. If you guys ever see Dave, his legs are like monstrous from all the cycling that he does. But the fitter people are, generally what that means is they're going to enjoy greater levels of wealth and financial prosperity. So the way I got into the medicine is I grew up on a cattle ranch in Idaho, and we had about 1,000 head of Black Angus cattle. And I used to move sprinkler pipes in the summer, and these planes would crop dust the fields, and I'd get soaked in Roundup. And I wanted to be anything but a rancher when I grew up. I had an uncle who was a doctor, and I said, I want to be like him. He's got the good job. He seems like relaxed. He's got the weekends off. And so it wasn't until I was in my undergraduate work at the University of Utah, getting ready to go to medical school there, that I got misdiagnosed by 5 different doctors. I started noticing my joints ached. I was putting on weight. I had brain fog that was so severe I couldn't really stay awake in class fully. And the doctors that ran my labs, they all said everything looks normal. They didn't really go any deeper than that. They offered, my skin was flared up too, so they offered some, antibiotics and steroid creams. And I realized that there's something else that needed to be addressed. And so one of my teachers in the history of medicine course I was taking, he exposed me to a whole new area of medicine and, in natural medicine. So I went to a naturopathic doctor who was also an acupuncturist. And that's where I had my full labs ran. And I discovered that I had an autoimmune disease called Hashimoto's. And that was the big turning point for me, because then I learned how the body can heal itself if you give it the right environment. So I removed the interferences. We removed some of the glyphosate from my body, some heavy metals that were there. We got rid of some of the parasites. And then we also got rid of the foods that were triggering inflammation in my body. And that led to such a great transformation in my health that I left the University of Utah and went to an integrated medical school in Hawaii. And that's where I studied both Eastern and Western medicine, and then set up EastWest Health 20 years ago.
Wow. Wow. Such an awesome journey. And again, I find so many parallels to wealth and health. And especially for me and my journey, I think most of us, right, we're not taught anywhere about wealth, like how to actually create wealth, how to preserve wealth, how to multiply wealth, right? We're all just taught that it's kind of, outsource that to Wall Street, right? And similar on the health side, right? I've found that there's like this entire other universe, all the things that you've been doing. And unfortunately, you had to go from this, pain to purpose, type of trajectory. But I think that's really the opportunity for the listeners out there, right? Is to discover, right, some of these, alternative medicine type approaches, because what I've found is that it's the things that you don't understand that are happening in your body, right? It's these, blind spots that you have. It's like opening the hood of the car and saying like, you might feel a certain way in a particular day, but man, you open the hood and all of a sudden, like, it's like, wow, there's some things not quite working right. And for whatever reason that might be, your epigenetics, your environment that you're in, different things like that. So how would you actually frame really the problems that people are living in this modern day world? How would you really summarize what is the problem?
Wow. Well, that's a deep question, Dave, and I appreciate it. But I think the biggest problem that we have is not a lack of information. I mean, we have more information in our smartphone than Bill Clinton had when he was president of the United States, right? It's like we have so many things. But the problem is the correct information and getting the right diagnostic testing, because I think two things, there's this concept we have at EastWest. We say no death by neglect. And so one of the big problems, and I think the biggest problem, is we neglect our health in two different ways. Number one, we neglect it by not getting the right tests ran. And just like a lot of people outsource their wealth strategy and their finances to Wall Street, and people do the same with their health. They outsource it to their doctor, and they don't really take the time to understand what tests need to be ran. So I want all of my clients to run their health the same way they run their business. You wouldn't run your business or you wouldn't run your investment strategies without having some metrics behind your decision making. And it's the same way in the healthcare field. The reason why we're in such a health crisis in the United States is because we're only looking at disease patterns, and we're looking to diagnose a disease based on lab values. And as long as you fit in that little box, then you get a diagnosis. And then what comes after the diagnosis is a medication to mask the symptom, or a surgery, right? There's nothing that's leading to long-term health. It's more of a disease management system. So the biggest problem is people neglect the information that exists that shows that, hey, if you can actually look at the right metrics and look at optimal ranges versus disease ranges. So anytime I run somebody's blood labs, I narrow the parameters so that I can see where things are outside of optimal range. Because no one who works with us, they're people who are already healthy and they want to get 3 to 5% healthier. People like you who've been working on their health for a long time, and you prize it. And so if you can get the right metrics, that helps solve the first problem of understanding where your body's breaking down in function. There's other pre-screenings you can do for cancer, like the Gallery test. There's stool testing. There's also a bunch of things that we can do when it comes to understanding heavy metal toxicity, issues in the gut. And it's phenomenal. And then we can get the right treatment strategies with peptides and stem cells and cord plasma exchange, all those things to really enforce the body's healing properties. But then the second part of no death by neglect is people who know that they've got issues in their health and they know they need to make a change, but they don't do anything about it. And so, it's one thing to have all the information and to execute on it. But I think what's lacking in the modern healthcare system is there's not an accountability partner. So you see your doctor once a year, maybe twice a year when you need an antibiotic. And your doctor, on your way out the door, the doctor says, "Oh, don't forget to diet and exercise. Eat well and exercise." They get an hour of training in medical school, which is one reason why I left conventional medical school and went to Hawaii. So I think those are probably the two biggest things that I see as far as the healthcare problems that we face right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's all really based on sick care. You're really treating the symptom and not the actual root cause. But I think just to help the audience a little bit, what I've found, what's interesting, it's like, think about it. If you go home to Thanksgiving and you're with your family and things, and the topic comes up and you start talking about, okay, have you done blood work? Oh yeah. I mean, my parents will say, sure, we went and had our blood work done, but they're literally only checking maybe 7 markers, right? So I think that's where the education is so important, and that, the mission that you're on, Regan, is just so powerful, to help people really understand that, number one, there's different types of testing that can be done. It should be done very comprehensively, right? And then also it's looking at the metrics that are really important, to you as an individual, right? Because it's very bio-individual. Because again, you go to a normal doctor, sure, I had blood work, I'm good to go, right? But there might be different things that you need to look for and test for.
No doubt. Yeah, I had a client come to me, a couple years ago, and he was an architect. And, one of the things that he mentioned is he said, I used to remember all the dimensions of the building, and now I don't. I put on 30 pounds. He had bone on his knees. And the doctors that he worked with, he went everywhere, and he was trying to seek solutions, but he got the same runaround. They did, he went to a neurologist, and the neurologist did a brain scan and everything looked good. He went to an endocrinologist, and, they're like, oh, your testosterone looks fine. It looks great, and from a functional perspective or a functional medicine perspective, his testosterone was like 50% of where it needed to be. And then when we ran the right labs, we found his brain, in fact, was completely inflamed. And that was one of the reasons why he couldn't remember the dimensions of the building. And it was just by looking at the body differently, instead of trying to isolate a diagnosis like dementia or early onset Alzheimer's, we were able to see markers in his labs that we made big improvements on right out of the gates just by looking at things differently.
Yeah, makes sense. So do you guys have like a particular approach or methodology when you get a new client kind of comes on board? Is there some type of, framework or something that you work with?
Yeah, the first thing that happens is we run blood labs. And if you've got blood labs ran already, we can take a look at those. I've got a phenomenal team of experts. I've trained about 1,500 doctors in functional medicine as far as how to read labs and how to use peptides based on where the lab values are off. And then I also have a great team that I've trained. I do work with patients as well. But I've got a phenomenal team. And then what we do is once we see the labs, then we take patients. Our initial program is what we call the Accelerate Wellness Program. And so the first phase is the reset phase. And the reset it's a 60-day process. But if you think about the big things that interfere with people's ability to heal, it's their lack of sleep, And so there's things that we utilize, like the 3-2-1 method with sleep. So are you familiar with 3-2-1 method, Dave?
I've heard some. I've heard another one that's, I think, 10-3-1. Is it's no caffeine, no food, no electronics. Something.
Okay, yeah. So the 3-2-1 is a little simpler, but it's basically 3 hours before you go to bed, stop eating. 2 hours before you go to bed, stop drinking any fluids, because so many dudes come to me and they're like, I think I have prostate issues. I'm up all night to urinate. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, when do you drink your fluids? And they're like, oh, usually I forget to drink during the day. I'm so busy. And so I try to get all my fluids in at night. And that's like the wrong time to hydrate. And then the 1 hour, the one is 1 hour before you go to bed, get rid of the blue lights, do, meditation, just set up your house where, you dim your lights, you turn off most of the lights, and you just have a time to connect with your family or your loved ones. Or if you live alone, grab a book. There's just easy things that you can do to relax your nervous system before you go to bed. We think our body should automatically be like at a 10 out of 10 as far as pushing ourselves, and then we just go 0 out of 10 and fall right to sleep. But there's this thing called heart rate variability. And if any of you have any kind of devices like a Garmin watch or an Apple Watch or a Ring, you can see your heart rate variability. And so it's kind of nice to train yourself at night before you go to bed to meditate and get your body in a relaxed state. And you notice you sleep longer and you sleep deeper. And then when you wake up, you'll see you have a greater heart rate variability. And so that's one of the things in the reset phase. The other things we're doing is figuring out where the interferences are. So to simplify the way our biology works, biology is super complicated. And so any inputs, you never know, we can give the same inputs to 100 people and they may all have different outputs. And so if you can get a person where they're sleeping great, and then you remove the interferences, then we have more predictability in the inputs. And so some of the interferences that we remove in the beginning are, we want to detox the liver. So we want to remove any kind of stasis in the biliary ducts where your body's not emulsifying fats and breaking down proteins appropriately. We want to get rid of any kind of toxins that exist. So whether that's heavy metals or if there's infections in the body, we found that there's kind of 4 main triggers that can interfere with the body's ability to recover. And one of those is physical trauma. And, we overtrain is a big thing in my community. It's less of people coming in who don't do any exercise. It's more like, I think we need to gear it down. And we do carotid artery scan, VO2 max testing, a bunch of different metabolic tests as well, just to see if a person's overloading what their body can tolerate. And so we get rid of any physical trauma. If someone's in pain, one of the very first things we want to do is get somebody out of pain, because I think we've all experienced what happens when we're in pain. And one of the big challenges and threats that pain brings is if you have chronic low back pain, for example. They did MRIs on people's brains who had chronic low back pain. This study was published, I believe, about 10 years ago, 2014, 2015. And they found that their brains actually aged 10 years faster in people who had chronic back pain versus people who didn't. So one of the things we want to do is get you out of chronic pain, and then chronic pain will age you much quicker. And not only that, you're going to be, the biggest risk that we have after the age of 65 is falling and breaking the head of our femur. Your all-cause mortality goes up by 50%. And so if you have pain, it's going to be really hard to build muscle mass to protect your joints and to maintain your balance so that you don't fall and break your hip. So we want to remove the interferences of pain. And then we also want to build up deficiencies. And that means when we run blood labs, we're going to look at your magnesium status, your calcium status, your phosphorus status. We'll look at all of the nutrients and minerals. And then we look at hormone imbalances. We look at where your peptide deficiencies are. And then we start building up those deficiencies. So if you just look at the most simple way of understanding how you can get your body to heal, all you need to do is look at the deficiencies you've got, and then remove the interferences. So remove the interferences from physical trauma. We talked about kind of over exercising. We talked about injuries that we've had from the past. I have a no pain policy, so I don't give pain any free rent in my body anymore. I'm kind of an adrenaline junkie, and I love skiing, snowboarding, mountain biking. And so there's gravity-fed sports seem to lend themselves to injuries. And so I've had a few over the years. And so I just realized no pain. So I did a whole body makeover about a year ago and got rid of all the pain, and it's been amazing. So that's one interference. The second one is the emotional traumas. And everybody carries around certain levels of emotional trauma. And Dave, you probably, the clients who we both work with, they're entrepreneurs who push hard, they're very successful, and they all have just a little bit of PTSD. You probably noticed that in your work, I'd imagine.
100%.
Yeah, because, at the end of the day, like Dan Sullivan says, there's one God that entrepreneurs answer to, and that's the cash flow God. And so sometimes, especially in the beginning of business, it's challenging, but I find if I can remove that kind of PTSD from the nervous system, man, my entrepreneurs and my clients just feel so much better. Because how many of you make good choices when you're stressed? It's probably very few of you. And so what we've learned to create a really predictable outcome, because that's our number one metric that we're looking at, is how can we improve your health? How much in a short period of time and with the fewest amount of side effects as possible. And so removing that stress from the nervous system makes such a big difference. Huge. I had a client that came to me after he sold his tech company for $32 million, and he got the wire as we're doing his blood review. And I said, "Oh, you must be thrilled. That's like, congratulations." And he looked at me and he's like, couldn't care less. He's like, I sacrificed my health, my family, everything to build this company. And now that I finally got to the finish line, it doesn't mean anything. And I want to prevent that from happening to people. And so one of the things we did with this individual is we started getting him exercising again. We started getting the right foods in his body. And every week he would, send me kind of a snapshot. He was losing about 1 to 2 pounds every week. And then about 30 days in, he had to get all of his clothes refitted. And then he kept sending me the bills for his tailor. Every couple of months, he'd have to go back into his tailor and get his suits refitted. But it was kind of fun to see because he got his purpose back. But before, that emotional trauma just wrecked him. He wasn't sleeping. He couldn't be in a relationship because he'd blow up all the time. So the emotional stress. The third one is stressors from infections. And, COVID or even the vaccine, a lot of injuries from the vaccines we see causing neurological issues, brain fog, where people just don't feel right. And then you can also have chronic infections. I just met with a client yesterday, and she had mononucleosis as a kid. And she had her tonsils removed when she was 19, and her energy just never recovered after that. And so what we were able to find is she had an Epstein-Barr viral load that was really driving down her central nervous system and her adrenal glands. And so she was tired all the time and dizzy. And so that's something we want to remove. Any kind of interferences, you've got parasites, dysbiosis in the gut. Those are some of the hallmarks of aging that can really accelerate our body's aging process. And then the fourth thing are chemical traumas. I mentioned my glyphosate exposure, and we're finding that about 95% of the population has glyphosate, which is found in Roundup. So it's all our crops are sprayed, and even if you're eating organic, you're still going to get some of those chemicals in your body. So getting rid of glyphosate, making sure there's no arsenic in your body, no mercury or heavy metals. Those chemical toxicities can be a big deal. So our protocol, Dave, is to find out, we're like detectives. We want to dig deep. We don't leave any stone unturned, but we want to dig deep and find out where the interferences are. And then with some of the novel therapies that we utilize in our programs, what used to take us 3 to 5 years to help people's health get recovered, now we can predictably help people reach their health goals in an unreasonable amount of time, which is usually 3 to 6 months. So the medicine's never been better. You know, my 20 years of practice, I always say I apologize for what we can do today, because it's going to be so much better tomorrow. But we're at the, as one person has told me, I'm at the bleeding edge of the cutting edge. You know, we're at the tip of the spear. And so we're seeing a phenomenal amount of transformations in people's health journey.
What if everything you thought you knew about investing was wrong? Would you like to create a wealth strategy like the top 1% have and get exclusive access to top private equity deals that provide downside protection, tax efficiency, predictable cash flow, and have a lucrative upside? Discover how with the Pantheon Advantage and join our investor club today at pantheoninvest.com.
Yeah, that's really amazing, Regan. I think it's such a comprehensive approach, really, to, look at your body and all of these different facets and different dimensions. And again, I think for most people, it's things you just don't even realize are happening. Right? Could have been something from your childhood or whatever. And I always, a big, motivation and driver, for me is to just help people try to get those insights, have that light bulb moment now before it becomes one of those, life altering moments, right? Where all of a sudden you find yourself in a hospital room, like, how did I even get here? Right? So if you can be proactive about it and uncover these things, detection is really everything, right? And then you can start to optimize.
Yeah. Because everyone's feels healthy the day before a heart attack or day before cancer. I mean, people feel like, oh, I'm in pretty good shape. So I think it's really important. And then one of the things that we found really interesting is, you and I have similar friends, Garrett Gunderson, Justin Donald, Brian Sweet, people in the financial world who are doing amazing things. But what they find is that when people get to a certain age and a certain level of wealth creation, they start looking back and think, oh, I should probably think about doing something with my health. And then they look at resources around them, and a lot of people don't know where to turn. Go to your primary care doctor and say, hey, I want to address the 12 hallmarks of aging, because what scientists have done is we've isolated 12 different hallmarks of aging. And if you can start reversing those, then not only can you enjoy a longer lifespan, but you can also enjoy a longer health span. Because one of my goals is to die fast at an old age. So a lot of times people don't think about how they want to die, but I had a grandfather who was 93, and one of the things that he was a coin trader, he was a fur trapper originally, and he was doing the same thing. He had this woodshed, and the day before he died, he was making this piece of art in his woodshed and a rocking horse for his grandkids. And then he mowed his lawn. And then that night he went to bed and he died in his sleep. So he died really fast at a pretty old age. Yeah, I want to die fast, but I want to be like 222 when I die and just, exit, So most people, it's that what Peter Attia calls the marginal decade, that last 10 years of our life are the worst 10 years of our life. But the healthiest patients that I've worked with, and we just had one of our clients that passed away, very healthy, but very fast, and he was in his late 80s, outlived everyone in his family. But the goal is to help you have that last 10 years be the best 10 years, because that's when you have so much to give. You have so much wisdom. You have so many great relationships that you fostered. I think it's a tragedy that people don't focus on some of these hallmarks of aging, and they don't think about it until they're in the nursing home. And by then it's too late.
Yeah. And really, even before that, I think doesn't Attia talk about it like, even past 55, you want to be kicking ass, past 55, right? Oh, yeah. So there's, so many opportunities to travel, right? To be with your family, right? To do sporting events and do amazing things, right? And you can really be present for those, if you have that vitality, right? Versus the majority. I mean, it's really sad when you look at the state of America and the health, with people. I mean, even, and it seems to be younger and younger, like each decade seems to actually be going down. The obesity rates, diabetes, it's just rampant in this country.
Yeah, it's called premature mortality, where people are walking around half dead because they have so many chronic diseases at earlier and earlier ages. So, yeah, we're seeing a disparity where people who actually invest in their health, there's access to greater technology and innovations that have ever existed before, and they're very safe, very simple. And so people are going to be living longer, while the rest of the population, they're going to be living shorter lives that are less fulfilling. And hopefully this trend will reverse. But right now, United States, our overall life expectancy has been dropping. It's not improving. But there is a subsection of the population that their health is exploding, their longevity is exploding, and we're seeing that every day. And it's a fascinating time to be alive, and especially to be in medicine. It's a gift that I can actually be able to practice this longevity medicine, and really a gift to be able to connect with you and your audience on it too. Because hopefully, there's people out there that are like, I want to know what to do with my health. And one of my favorite proverbs is, when is the best time to plant a tree? And the best time was 20 years ago, right? So, but the second best time is today. So today you can plant that tree, and your 20-year your future self will thank you for the decision you made to do something about your health.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's just such a paradox, really, Regan, right? Because we live in this day and age with all the technology and the advancements at our fingertips, yet, we are going backwards, right? With, so many different things. And, when I look at the, movement of biohacking and talking to, Dave Asprey and stuff and Ben Greenfield, all these guys, right? I mean, it's kind of interesting because we're doing all of these things that we used to do in the old days. Like, okay, you should get up. Like, we have to be now coached that you should get up and go get sunlight in the morning, right? Right. Or you have to go buy a device to do red light therapy so you can get red light and mimic the light of the sun, at night. Or you're coaching people, like, you have to go to bed at night and turn off screens, right? It's really kind of ironic.
No, totally. It is funny. Like, sometimes common sense is not common practice. And you see that just as much in wealth and investing as I do in the health field, where people don't even realize it. I mean, I was just talking to a client this morning, and he lives in Switzerland, and he's like, yeah, I'm only sleeping 6 hours. I wake up every morning at 6 and I just can't sleep longer. I'm like, well, have you thought about going to bed earlier? And he's like, oh yeah, I guess I could do that. It's just like simple, right? It's like your body wants to wake up at 6. It doesn't want to go to bed at midnight. It wants to go to bed closer to 9:30. So
awesome. So Regan, I've got a copy of your book here.
Yes.
Which is called The Peptide Blueprint, which is a great book. I've read many books. I've read Peptide Protocols. I've read Jay Campbell's book.
Nice.
But yours was really good. And I think a lot of people are kind of curious, really, what peptides are. The news about them is that, all about the regulation and everything. But can you help the audience understand a little bit about, what are peptides? Let's talk a little bit about the regulation, and let's talk about a couple of use cases as well.
You got it. Yeah. So peptides are just protein shapes. They're strings of amino acids, and what these folded proteins do is they turn on genes in your body. So if you think about, as we age, the universe just wants to recycle us after about the age of 35, and it does that by turning off genes. And so that's where we get wrinkles, our skin starts changing, our organs don't, quite function as well, our muscles start atrophying. But if you can turn on the genes, like for example, growth hormone genes, 50% of them are turned off by the age of 40. And so if you can go in and use a peptide like CJC1295 or tesamorelin or sermorelin or some of these growth hormone releasing peptides or growth hormone secretagogues, what we see is that the body can now start to engineer its own growth hormone without the risks of doing the exogenous growth hormone. And so we see that there's muscle building capabilities, people sleep deeper, They recover faster. They feel like they did when they were young. And that's just one category of peptides. There's peptides that we can use for the immune system. So if somebody has like long COVID, or they have, just an immune system that's beat up from traveling, we can use a peptide called thymosin alpha-1. And what that does is it helps train the white blood cells so that they're more intelligent. They know how to selectively target pathogens, and they know how to activate the immune system in a way that's a natural adaptation and response to a potential threat. There's also peptides that we can use for mitochondrial function. There's a really great peptide called MOD-SC. And in this one, in the research, they took old mice and they put them on a treadmill next to young mice to see how much farther the young mice could go. And it was about twice the distance. And then the researchers hypothesized, they said, well, MOT-C is diminished in elderly mice. Let's do MOT-C injections of this peptide. They injected the mice for 7 days of MOT-C, and then they put the old mice on the treadmill with the young mice, and they found that the old mice could run just as far as the young mice just by using this peptide. MOT-C is activated when you're in a sauna, so the heat shock proteins activate MOT-C. It's also found more expressed in the Japanese population, which generally live longer than the rest of the other countries. And so there's peptides for mitochondrial function, endurance, like ARA 290, that Lance Armstrong was using back in the day. There's also phenomenal peptides. Some of the most popular are the GLP-1 agonists, like semaglutide or semaglutide, same, different pronunciation, same peptide, or tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro or Ozempic, are kind of the pharmaceutical names. But these peptides, these GLP-1 agonists, if used properly, and a lot of weight loss clinics are using these peptides like semaglutide or tirzepatide, and they're just handing it out, and they're not taking patients through lifestyle changes. So people lose a lot of weight, but they also have other issues in their health because they haven't changed their lifestyle. They'll lose muscle mass, and that's the big criticism of some of these peptides. But really, if you use GLP-1 agonist properly, you can build muscle, because insulin is the most androgenic or muscle building or anabolic or muscle building peptide in your body. And so when you have more insulin sensitivity, which is what these GLP-1s do, you're going to have less sugar cravings. I've got one of my clients who has one of the most extensive wine collections in Utah, and now he doesn't crave wine at all. He's like, "What am I going to do with all my wine, Regan? I don't want it." And he's not only that, but he's lost 85 pounds in about a year and a half. So he looks like a completely new human, which is so exciting to see. But we use the GLP-1s to get him there. So if you use them right, they can be really exciting. You mentioned some of the regulations. And so one of the things that we're finding is that the more popularity the peptides have, the more that the FDA has had to change their policies. And so the thing that people forget is the FDA doesn't regulate the practice of medicine. They just, they basically try to protect the population. And I think in the United States, the trustability in the FDA and some of the National Institutes of Health after COVID is that's dwindled somewhat. But one of the regulations, the FDA, they said, hey, and they used to place there's now 17 peptides that were put in a category that the FDA says we don't know if it's safe or not, and so please don't compound that until we find out if these peptides are safe, because we wanted to get them into the green category instead of generally considered safe. We just wanted them to be considered safe by the FDA. But the FDA said they needed more clinical data. And so that's kind of the thing. It doesn't mean that we can't get these peptides. It just means that the FDA is they're actively looking at these peptides. And I think from what people say, what's behind the regulation, it wasn't from people being injured by the peptides. We find that we have fewer side effects from peptides than we do from, vitamin IVs or even supplements in general, because we dose them low. We cycle people on and off peptides. A lot of doctors just put you on the same peptide forever, and that's not the way that you want to use them. They're just, once the genes are turned on, if you have the right lifestyle, they'll stay turned on. So you don't have to stay on the peptides. But the FDA, what they're doing is, now that they're looking at the safety profile, we also think, and I don't know any facts on this, but because the GLP-1 peptides have been such money makers for the pharmaceutical companies do a lot of the research. They're using university research that they may fund, but they are trying to bring more peptides to the mass market, like they have with the GLP-1s. So I think that's where a lot of the regulation comes from, Dave, is that it's not necessarily that we've seen all these adverse events from peptides.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was super helpful to understand that. And I can attest to the fact that, after, working with some of these peptides in the past few years, I mean, if you're really looking for some optimization, new levels, it's amazing. And very, some practical things too, like, the immune support one, for instance, you're doing a ton of traveling in and out of airports all the time. If you can jack up your immune system, you're going to completely protect yourself. Or we didn't even talk about BPC 157. I mean, I've had surgery on both of my knees and have had challenges with that. And that's produced some of the most massive, results in terms of, healing and reducing that pain. So that's really big. And I keep some of that on hand too, right? If I have some kind of, injury or some kind of, freak accident, right? To start treating that. So I think there's huge opportunities, and it's becoming, I think a little bit more and more popular now. I mean, take a look at someone like Jeff Bezos, right? From his early days to take a look at him now. I mean, he's definitely optimized, right?
It's so funny seeing the side by side. Yeah, and that's where peptides are so phenomenal, because most of the people that you see who are just really, they look like a new human. They look like an upgraded version of themselves. 98% of them are using peptides to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's such a great way to describe it. It's really just, if you want to be Regan 2.0 or Regan 3.0,
right. Man,
this is like a whole new level to unlock. But again, thinking about, I think what's important is the use case, for what's important to you. If you're, again, challenged with something that you're trying to overcome or trying to optimize, it's not a one size fits all type of thing, right?
Right. Yeah. It's got to be very selective, because if you don't need the peptides, if you're not running the right tests and you're just putting the peptides in your body, you may not even feel anything. Or if you're using peptides, like where you can get it on what we call the black market, where if you can purchase your own peptides without a prescription. We've also tested those peptides, and very few of them are the full amino acid complex. So you're actually shortchanging yourself. Yeah, they may be a couple bucks less expensive, but if you're, putting yourself at risk by injecting a contaminated product, for example, that hasn't been properly tested, if your peptides say for research use only, I would steer clear of that. You want to work with a great physician, a great team who knows what they're doing with peptides, and that's where you can get the biggest benefits.
Yeah, great point. I would definitely concur with that, right? Definitely work with someone like Regan in EastWest Health, right? Or someone who's really qualified to be able to, not only source these, but administer them and make sure you're on the right protocol.
For sure.
Awesome. It's been such a delight having you on, Regan, unpacking so many of these optimization, hacks and everything. So I think people have really enjoyed this. And if people would like to learn more, I know you have kind of a special gift for the audience today, if you'd like to share.
Yeah. So any of you who would like to get your blood work ran and really go deep into what peptides would be best for you and what may benefit you, then what we'll do is we'll provide a link in the show notes that you can go get your blood work ran. You can meet with my team, one of our program advisors, and they will take you through step by step everything that's needed in order for you to take that first step in getting your blood work ran. And then you'll also have the ability to have that blood work interpreted by my team of my medical team of some of the best doctors in the country who can read your labs and get you the right peptides.
Awesome. And do you want to share your podcast or anywhere else people can follow you?
I'd love that. Yeah, my podcast is called Unreasonable Health, and Dave has promised that he'll be a guest on it soon. And then you can also just find us at agelessfuture.com and acueastwest.com. Those are a couple different places where you can find some very interesting information on what we talked about today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Regan. Really appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Wealth Strategy Secrets. If you'd like to get a free copy of the book, go to holisticwealthstrategy.com. That's holisticwealthstrategy.com. If you'd like to learn more about upcoming opportunities at Pantheon, please visit pantheoninvest.com. That's pantheoninvest.com.